I would like to thank Dr. Banshi Sabu sir for inviting me to this wonderful. I think it's an extraordinary event, and I believe that this is really going to change the the way we conduct conferences in future. And also a very warm namaste to Dr. Rakesh Sahai sir and Dr. Jethwani sir, both of whom actually have been mentors for me personally. Dr. Sahai sir has been a great professor of endocrinology, and Dr. Jetwani sir has been a mentor for me in my own state. So I thank you both for allowing me to share the space with you. So what I'm going to talk about is monogenic and secondary diabetes, which is essentially the term glucocrinology as it is coined by our current president of Endocrine Society of India, Dr. Sanjay Kalra sir. So
Can you take that question there? You can just read out the question which is on the screen. Can you see it on your screen?
sorry.
Audience, TV team, Mr. Rohit, can you run the poll question?
Yeah, it is on the screen. So I'll just read it out.
Yeah.
As per your experience, what is the proportion of patients with secondary diabetes and monogenic diabetes in your routine clinical practice? Is it less than 1%, 1 to 5%, or is it 5 to 10%, 10 to 20%, or more than 20%? So we would request all the audience to give their opinion on this, and then we'll discuss this later as Om continues with this talk.
Sure. Thank you very much, sir. And so what we are essentially going to discuss today is what is not type 1, not type 2, the other forms of diabetes, which we are going to be discussing today. So what I'm going to do is, and I'm going to make this talk extremely practical and extremely useful for any practicing clinician to really use it in their own clinical practice day in, day out. So we'll take top 10 high yield practical points to look for, to fish for other forms of diabetes. So the first important secondary form of diabetes, which we all need to recognize and treat, is iatrogenic Cushing syndrome. Iatrogenic Cushing syndrome or exogenous Cushing syndrome is the most common form of Cushing syndrome that we encounter in clinical practice in India. It is the same worldwide, but in India, it is particularly a problem because of the use of alternative medications. So, this cartoon has been doing the rounds on WhatsApp, and those who are fans of, OTT platforms, they'll know that one of the recent web series talks about that, I read about this in the Shastras, but I actually read, I came to know about it from WhatsApp, right? And this is a WhatsApp post. And, now there's a lot of talk about dexamethasone being used in treatment of COVID-19. And, people, we have almost all the drugs available over the counter. And, 1 year later, you'll see a family of patients presenting with classical iatrogenic Cushing syndrome in clinical practice. So, and this is a post we made, tomorrow, everybody will start dexamethasone. Day after tomorrow, they'll develop hyperglycemia, which correlates with secondary diabetes. A few months later, they'll start appearing Cushingoid, and then somebody will stop the steroid, and then they'll develop adrenal insufficiency. Very typical of what happens in our day-to-day practice. So this is a patient, right? You need to understand and you need to recognize a patient clinically. This is a classical patient of Cushing syndrome. You can see here the facial flush. The classical flush, you can see he's extremely red in color, like a tomato, right? You can see that. The moon face, though it is not very clear in this because we have hidden his face a little, he has a moon face. The moon face was actually very clear in the cartoon. Typically, a moon face is, and Dr. Sahai, professor of endocrinology, would agree with me, when you see from the front, if you're not able to see the ears, that shows that there is temporal fullness, and this temporal fullness is suggestive of moon face, right? So this typical moon face is seen in a Cushing's patient. You can see the stria in this patient, and you can see this is another patient with iatrogenic Cushing syndrome with classical striae, gynecomastia, and other clinical features. He also has a facial flush and moon-shaped face, which is seen. So you need to recognize iatrogenic Cushing syndrome. You need to pick up, right? It could be, of course, could be true Cushing syndrome, could be endogenous Cushing syndrome, but Cushing syndrome is an important cause of secondary diabetes, and it has to be recognized clinically. How do you recognize it? Based on investigation, based on diagnosis? What you do is you ask for serum cortisol And you also ask for, and this is a trick which we learned, you ask for DHEAS. Uh, Typically, a patient who appears Cushingoid, if the cortisol level is typically less than 5 microgram per deciliter, often less than 3 microgram per deciliter, a morning baseline fasting 6 to 10 a.m. cortisol would strongly suggest a presence of iatrogenic Cushing syndrome. But a more sensitive, but less specific, but a more sensitive test is DHEAS. And DHEAS is one more hormone which is produced by your adrenal cortex. And unlike cortisol, cortisol has a diurnal variation. Cortisol often levels fluctuate. The DHEAS levels, they tend to be more static and tend to be more stable for a period of 2 to 3 weeks. And hence DHEAS value tells you about the exposure to glucocorticoids for a longer period of time. And if the DHEAS values are lower than the age-specific normal range, then you really need to consider iatrogenic Cushing syndrome. So, DHEAS, you need to know the age-specific ranges. They'll be often given by your labs. So these are the tests, right? So again, a very important practical point I'd like to tell you is that if you're suspecting iatrogenic Cushing's, consider doing a serum cortisol 8 am matched with a DHEAS. And in certain cases, you can check for the HB axis by doing an ACTH stimulation test. But remember, patients will not always tell you. Now, if clinical medicine in India was as easy as it was in the West, where you have all the data available of the patient right at your EMR screen or at your fingertips, things would be much easier. But in India, you always have to fish for it. You have to hunt for it. You have to look for it, which makes our job extremely exciting, right? And nothing less than Byomkesh Bakshi or that of a Sherlock Holmes. You really need to search for the hidden steroids, for the hidden pathology, which the patient would not tell you, obviously. The hidden steroids would be often present in ointments and creams. Like I said, in India, everything is available over the counter, right? There is no drug in India which cannot be bought over the counter, in any part of the country. And these highly potent steroids and ointments can be easily available. Patients don't know what dose to use. Patients don't know how frequently to use it, and they use it indiscriminately, leading to a problem, right? Any product, any complementary alternative product that claims to cure asthma, allergy, atopic situations is likely to have a glucocorticoid like feature in it. It is likely to have it. Remember, some plant products also have glucocorticoid like feature. Don't take my word for it. I'm going to show you a actual data for the same in the next few slides. I'll tell you a story of our patient, and this patient was just recently discharged, and it's a very interesting story. So this patient was visibly appearing Cushingoid when I saw her for the first time. She developed some kind of respiratory problem, so she was shifted to the ICU. Now, for the first few days when I saw her, we of course sent the investigations for Cushing's, iatrogenic Cushing. She actually also had a fractured neck femur a few weeks back. And the patient, when she was in the ward, she had very high sugars. The sugars were in the range of 300 and 400. The insulin requirement was extremely high. But as soon as the patient was shifted to the ICU, the insulin requirement came down drastically. The patient was kept in isolation for a few days because of suspected COVID-19, and then shifted to another ICU ward, and then shifted back to the hospital, to the ward room. And as long as she was in the ICU, her glycemic control was extremely good, right? It was almost coming to normal without much insulin required. But as soon as the patient was shifted back to the ward, her sugar started increasing again within a few hours, right? We looked at the patient's report and found that the cortisol was low, the patient's DHEAS was low, and we strongly suspected that the patient is taking some iatrogenic product. And what we found from the patient's own bag was some ointment, alternative medication, which claimed to cure some kind of skin lesion that she had, and probably was likely to have glucocorticoids. We stopped those. We asked the patient not to take it. The patient was taking while in hospital, which is very, very fascinating. And as soon as the patient stopped it, the things became much better. So be very, keep your eyes and ears open. Things like this occur in India very commonly. This is a study no less from Ahmedabad, where they've shown that they've done a systemic review of plant steroids as having potent anti-inflammatory agents. And what they've shown in this study is that certain plant agents contain glucocorticoid-like agents. So when you tell your patients, when Ayurvedic doctors tell their patient that the patient will become better, they are not wrong, because these plants actually have glucocorticoid-like properties, and the patients actually improve. But when it has a glucocorticoid-like properties, it does not mean that it does not screw up your HP axis. It definitely screws up the HP axis, leading to both hyperglycemia, as well as, if somebody stops it, a secondary or a tertiary rather adrenal insufficiency. So these are important aspects of iatrogenic Cushing's. Of course, like I said, endogenous Cushing syndrome also must be recognized, but in India, iatrogenic Cushing's is very, very common and should be kept in mind while dealing with these patients. Second important, endocrine condition or glucochronology that you need to really fish out is acromegaly. You need to recognize it clinically. This is a endocrine awareness post which was made by us a few weeks back, right? To basically, tell the patients what actually are the signs of acromegaly. So we often look at the patient's earlier pictures, but very importantly, the rings which the patient wears, often it becomes tighter, the shoe sizes often change. These are all signs of growth hormone excess to a condition which is known as acromegaly. And high growth hormone levels often lead to hyperglycemia, which is again a known fact in clinical practice. I'll show you some patients with very subtle signs of acromegaly. We actually picked these patients up. These patients actually presented in our endocrine OPD with diabetes. This patient did not come to us screaming that they have acromegaly. We had to fish for it. We had to hunt for it, right? We had to look for it. And these patients actually presented to us with just diabetes mellitus. This lady, you can see the fullness of the lips. You can see the nose, which is flaring up, right? Not a very classical acromegaly, but a subtle sign. And this patient turned out to have a huge pituitary macroadenoma, which was operated. Another lady had a slightly smaller, a tumor, but you can see again the fullness of the lips here, the nose, and some supraciliary thickening, which you can see in this patient very clearly. This patient also turned out to have acromegaly. She presented to us again mainly with diabetes mellitus. On taking a history, we also found that patient was having oligomenorrhea, had some amount of discharge from the breast also, galactorrhea also, and this patient was ultimately recognized. This patient has a classical supraciliary fullness, supraciliary thickness, and you can see again this patient had acromegaly. So these are all subtle signs of acromegaly. So you keep your eyes, ears open and look for these when you're thinking of a secondary form of diabetes. Acromegaly, the first step to make a diagnosis is to do an IGF-1. That's the first test you have to consider doing it. Don't do a growth hormone level. Remember, growth hormone levels tend to be fluctuating, and a random GH level or a fasting GH level makes no sense. The first test you have to do is an IGF-1. Remember, growth hormone levels tend to be higher in patients with uncontrolled diabetes, and IGF-1 tends to be lower. So ideally, both the tests should be done after good glycemic control. And always remember, of course, GH you don't have to do. What you have to do is you have to do a GH suppression with glucose, and failure to suppress growth hormone is suggestive of acromegaly. Normal IGF-1 in a diabetic patient with poorly controlled diabetes would not rule out acromegaly, but a high IGF-1 in a patient with poorly controlled diabetes would point to a high probability of having acromegaly. Now, we are all lazy people, right? So in all the three patients where we fished out, we found acromegaly. We did an IGF-1, and all the three patients actually turned out to have very high IGF-1. Later, it was followed by other anterior pituitary function tests, and later on an MRI, which confirmed the diagnosis of acromegaly with a large pituitary tumor, which was then operated, and the patients became much better. So these are some of the things. Of course, there are other agents, other drugs which can cause hyperglycemia. Some very important ones. But before that, you need to remember that a patient often has predisposition for hyperglycemia. As you heard about in the earlier talk, often these patients are obese, they'll have NAFLD or NASH, and that's the first hit, followed by a second agent, which leads to a second hit, right? And this first and second hit can combine, leads to hyperglycemia or diabetes mellitus. Some common agents are tacrolimus and cyclosporine. They are commonly used in post-transplant situation, often leading to post-transplant diabetes. And these agents must be looked for whenever the patient is suspected to have diabetes post-renal transplant or renal or liver transplant, apart from glucocorticoids also, of course, which are given after transplant. This is our paper. This is published in the RSSDI's journal, which is Indian Journal of Diabetes in Developing Countries. We have given a protocol for management of new onset of diabetes after transplant, a novel algorithm. And this could be very useful for those patients, those doctors who are practicing in centers having transplant done very often. Again, another important form of diabetes is neonatal diabetes. And the most important thing about neonatal diabetes is to recognize it, to identify it. Often these patients are misdiagnosed as having type 1 diabetes, leading to a problem leading to a poor quality of life actually for a lot of these patients. So neonatal diabetes, it's the very simple dictum is that if a child presents with frank diabetes mellitus less than 6 months of age, is very likely to have neonatal diabetes. However, up to 9 to 15 months of age, it can be considered as a possibility, right? And typically, less than 9 months of age, we always check for neonatal diabetes in these patients very commonly. Other features, of course, they'll not have ketoacidosis at the time of presentation, and the insulin antibodies, pancreatic antibodies like GAD65 and IA2 often are negative in these patients. How do you test for neonatal diabetes? Well, you what you do is you send it to the UK, right? So not the patient, you send the reports, send the blood sample or the DNA extract to United Kingdom. Of this, you can visit this website. This website is diabetesgenes.org. The Wellcome Trust has actually given a grant for testing for neonatal diabetes, and up till you can see here, it is often done free of charge up till 30th September 2020. After that, we don't know whether the grant will be continued or not. So if your patients are waiting for getting a neonatal diabetes tested, please do it before 30th September 2020. It will be done free of charge. Of course, the patient will have to bear that cost for the courier and transport, but of course it is done. We had several patients whom we sent these investigations, and often remember, it should be done before the 9 months of, if the patient presents for the first time before 9 months of age. So we have, like I said, sent several. Of course, these tests are done in India as well through various organizations. But this is something which is they do it very well, and it's very very they give you a beautiful report, and you learn a lot from that. MODY. Now, MODY, of course, it's not Narendra Modi. It's maturity onset diabetes of young. Again, a form of monogenic diabetes that has to be recognized, that has to be identified. MODY accounts for 1 to 3% of patients with diabetes mellitus. Not a very common form of diabetes, but 1% of millions of patients with diabetes that we see is a big number. Remember, often patients are present for the first time with less than 25 years of age, so young age of presentation, often have 3 generations of family history. I'll just contest this in a second. Often in India, the age of presentation may be slightly older, right? And hence, that strict age less than 25 is not always something you have to be looked at. Often they have 3 generation history of diabetes mellitus, often have normal BMI, and there is no history of diabetic ketoacidosis in the past. If you compare it with, how do you differentiate from type 1? Those pancreatic isolate antibodies like autoantibodies like GAD65 are negative. There is evidence of endogenous insulin production beyond the honeymoon period. So about 3 to 5 years after the onset of diabetes, also the patient continues to have some endogenous insulin production. If you measure a C-peptide, the C-peptide is measurable even after 3 years of the onset of diabetes. The level more than equal to 0.6 nanogram per ml or 0.2 nanomoles per liter. The insulin requirement often for these patients is very low. They are extremely insulin sensitive, less than 0.5 units per kg per day, and there is no history of diabetic ketoacidosis, even when patient has inadvertently omitted his or her insulin in the past. Compared to type 2, again, there'll be younger age of onset. The patient will not be obese. Of course, this is again changing because you'll often see obesity generally increasing in society. The patient does not have acanthosis nigricans or other signs of insulin resistance, and they'll often be normal triglyceride or elevated or normal or elevated HDL levels, which is not seen in your type 2 diabetic patients because these are components of metabolic syndrome. Other key features are they tend to have mild, stable fasting hypoglycemia that does not progress much. They're extremely sensitive to sulfonylureas. they often have certain extra pancreatic features, which we'll see in a few minutes. And there's a personal history or family history of often neonatal diabetes also, which is typically seen with MODY 1. So these are the various MODYs. We'll see a few of them in more detail. So how do you evaluate for MODY? You can do something known as you can do a fasting or a random C-peptide, or you can consider doing a mixed meal stimulation test. And these are the cutoffs. Those who are interested can take a screenshot of this. I'll of course tell you something what we do. What we do at our hospital is we do a mixed meal stimulation test. So we take a fasting plasma glucose, along with that a fasting C-peptide, and we also give, then after that we give a proprietary mixed meal, liquid meal, and after 90 minutes we recheck these values. And at fasting level, if the C-peptide is less than 0.24 nanogram per ml, this suggests absolute insulin deficiency. We have graded this as grade 1F, and of course you can see the other gradings as we have scaled it. And if it's more than 1 nanogram per ml, it rules out absolute insulin deficiency. When done post-stimulation, value of less than 0.6 suggests absolute insulin deficiency. You can see the other grades, and if it's more than 3.3, it suggests normal or rules out absolute insulin deficiency. So these are important tests which should be considered in your patients where you are suspecting type 1 versus versus type 2 rather, or versus MODY. And remember, all these tests should be done after the patient has reasonably good glycemic control, because the patient could be having glucotoxicity, in which case you would often lead to a poor result. You have autoantibodies like GAD65, IA2, and ZNT8. These three should be done. GAD65 and IA2 must be done in all patients, even including older people, because these antibodies tend to persist for a long time. Especially GAD65 antibody can also be detected as late as 30, 40 years of age. Then you have a diabetes a probability calculator. This is the website you can check out. This is again available free of charge. You can enter the details. This is from Diabetes Genes. Again, I'm showing you this website. You can take a screenshot of this. You have to enter these details, age at diagnosis, sex, currently on what treatment, and so on and so forth. And it will give you a result which will tell you the probability of the patient having diabetes. And this has to be done for mainly for age less than 35, because this has been developed for these group of patients. Now, MODY 1, the patient generally has a family history or a personal history of transient neonatal diabetes. MODY 2 is an asymptomatic form of mild stable hyperglycemia, often diagnosed during pregnancy or in a routine checkup. MODY 2, during pregnancy, it has significance because you need to monitor for the fetal abdominal circumference. Remember, the fetus may not have MODY. The mother may have MODY, right? In which case, the fetus can be impacted by hyperglycemia, just like you can expect in gestational diabetes. So if the abdominal circumference of the fetus is more than 75th percentile, then you should consider treating the mother with insulin, because in such cases, the fetus has not inherited the gene, and the fetus is likely to be impacted by the hyperglycemia. If the fetus has inherited the gene from the father and the mother is normal, it can lead to reduced growth in the fetus. But interestingly, if the fetus has inherited the disease from the gene from the mother, the fetus will have normal growth. So if the mother is also abnormal and the fetus is also abnormal, well, you have a perfect situation. So that's what you need to keep your eyes and ears open for. MODY 3 is a very common form of, amongst the MODY, very common form of MODY. Patients often present with high insulin sensitivity and significant glycosuria, and the delta, that is post-meal minus fasting sugar, is often very high, more than 90. MODY 3, one interesting test you should consider doing is doing an HSCRP level, and these levels are often low than other forms of diabetes, which is an interesting test to be considered. And MODY 3 responds to sulfonylurea, especially glibenclamide, that's a drug of choice. They also respond to meglitinides and GLP-1 receptor agonists. MODY 1 also treatment is similar, so you can consider SUs as the first choice of treatment. MODY 5, patients often don't present to endocrinologists or diabetologists. They often present to nephrologists with early onset of renal dysfunction. You have renal cysts like in ADPKD, magnesium wasting, and early onset of gout. MODY 5 response to sulfonylurea is not as good as MODY 3, and a lot of these patients may need insulin early on. Then, of course, the last and the most important one is pancreatic diabetes, which are certain other forms of diabetes, also not uncommon in India. FCPD, that is fibrocalculous pancreatic diabetes, is common in India, especially in southern parts of India, but it's not also uncommon in certain poor regions of India like Bihar and Jharkhand, even in Chhattisgarh, and it has also been reported from Gujarat. So, we have had several patients with FCPD on our follow-up. Patients often present with history of abdominal pain, weight loss, steatorrhea, and eventually develop diabetes. One important test which I learned from my gastro colleagues is to do a fecal elastase test, which is an early sensitive test for pancreatic exocrine dysfunction. These patients characteristically don't develop diabetic ketoacidosis. If you do an X-ray of the abdomen, you'll find pancreatic calcification, which is quite characteristic. The diagnostic criteria is given by Dr. V. Mohan et al. Often you, of course, have diabetes. So the patient is from tropical country. There's absence of other causes of pancreatitis. And along with that, patient has abnormal morphology of pancreas on imaging. Often the pancreas you will show have calcification. You will have abnormal pancreatic function test. And like I said, fecal elastase is a useful test. History of abdominal pain since childhood and steatorrhea. So these are typical history. Pancreatic diabetes, another important cause is actually pancreatic cancer, and 25% of patients with pancreatic cancer present with new onset of diabetes. So especially older gentlemen or the females with history of smoking, you should consider this as an important history. You should consider, like I said, in older patients with new onset of diabetes, often having asymptomatic hyperglycemia and sometimes having family history of pancreatic cancer. CA19-9 is a useful test. However, it has a lot of false positive and negative. So unfortunately, you can not use it as a screening test in all your older diabetic people. And contrast CT scan, pancreatic protocol is a standard test that you should consider when you are suspecting a pancreatic diabetes or having carcinoma of pancreas as a first presentation for diabetes. So I'll just summarize with some important take-home message. Watch out again for iatrogenic Cushing, especially in the era of COVID-19 where dexamethasone is making a lot of noise. You should really look at Cushing's syndrome. It is more common than you think. Keep an eye out for acromegaly. Again, the patient will not scream out acromegaly. The patient will have subtle signs, and which you described in this presentation, you need to really watch out for. Children less than 6 months of age, especially or 9 months of age, should be considered having neonatal diabetes. And MODY, you can use a MODY risk calculator to evaluate for the same. It is available free of charge on Diabetes Genes website from Exeter. And you can use this to really calculate the risk of your patient having MODY. And FCPD is an important cause of diabetes in India. In the southern parts of India, it is recognized easily, but in western and northern parts of India, we are not that familiar with it. So we often miss out this important form of diabetes, which should be recognized. And new onset of diabetes in older people, you need to rule out pancreatic cancer as a possible etiology in these patients. So I thank you all for your patient listening. Again, to all the international delegates and speakers, namaste to all of you. And